So we know that organizations like Healthy Caribbean Coalition is on this campaign, really trying to get the message all throughout the region to talk about the dangers of ultra processed snacks, and then be targeted to children, targeted to schools. And of course, the Grenada Food Nutrition Council is in support of that message in it. And with our Fruity Wednesdays, we're saying trying to encourage adults and children to have a local fruit instead of an ultra processed snack. So this leads into my next question in terms of Grenada. Like many Caribbean nations, we're seeing a rise in the consumption of these ultra processed snacks. What are the health risks associated with these foods? And how do they contribute to chronic non communicable diseases?
So when you talk about the health risk, I think one of the very first ones we see with processed with ultra processed foods, and again, not all ultra processed foods are the same. So we're talking about the chips, the convenience foods that we consume on a little bit. You know, you go in a lunch bag, it might be so we buy at the shop. Because over the years they've always been there. I remember the stories of of my grandparents. They would say they only had a soda around Christmas time. Now we see that the availability and the abundance of it has risen because it seems as though that in a developing country, your mark of developing or financial astuteness, if you want to call it that, or capacity was determined by the kinds of food that you had access to. It might sometimes come across as though if you can have a soda, then you feel financially okay, because those are things that was a luxury because of the financial challenge. When it comes to those foods, however, we see that the very first area that they negatively contribute to is things like obesity. One is because we know that highly processed food, they are processed, and initially processed foods came in because we need to have food that was shelf stable, because we know that the food system suffered shock. In places like North America, we know that there were different seasons, so you couldn't plant right wrong. There is no plant necessarily planted in the fall and in the winter, and so you had to be able to have food to last you, because regardless of in season or out of season, the body still requires the nutrients from the food. In doing so, however, I think somewhere along the line, we money got to the center stage, and it was a viable business opportunity. And then marketing came into play when we started to push it. The challenge with this is simply that whenever we overly process food, the collateral is the loss of nutrients. One of those key nutrients that we could talk about is also fiber. Think of flour. Wheat is some people might say it's not healthy, but wheat in essence is quite nutritious. But to have a shelf stable food that might taste better in pastries and other products, they will remove fiber, they will remove the bran, and they will remove the germ. Those are the nutrient dense part of the meals. Now, if you take a time and you walk to the grocery store, think of the amount of food on a ratio. The amount of food that is made with white flour versus whole wheat flour. And then you'll also realize that with those foods, they're all low in fiber. Think of the amount of foods, and these are all carbohydrates again. Think of the breads, your pastas, your rice, but also if you go to the sugar section, those are all carbohydrate foods, they're simple sugars. If you go to the dressing section with the sauces, those are still all carbohydrates because they're mostly there's an abundant amount of sugar in them. So when you look at our food supply, no wonder why our foods are not going to be filling and we're eating more often. But also, as a society, in the name of development, we've gotten quite busy. And the busyness, it has also called for us to choose foods that are convenient that we can go on the fly. So in an effort to make it and to grow and to improve our financial situation, those foods came in handy. And it was an opportunity that I think companies and marketers took advantage of. But I always believe that you cannot bring what is not demanded. So I see that as being a loop that we somehow have to try to break. When you travel to places like the US, convenience foods, they're there, But with the health consciousness, convenience food have also taken a different route. You see pre-packed salads, you see meals that you can discover they're also quite healthy, whether they're frozen that you can go home and cook them, but they're healthy and they still have a lot of the nutritional value as opposed to the cookies and the cakes that we might consume or the fried chicken. And I'm not saying that these foods are bad because I believe that a lot of foods can fit within the context of a healthy lifestyle. The challenge is that these foods have taken up the majority of our eating patterns because you're busy. Some people don't want to have access to, don't want to go too far because in the hour lunchtime they may not be able to buy healthy food and maybe some crackers and cheese might be the most convenient thing. This goes up to the employer. How does that support their productivity in the workplace? So I mean, when we talk about chronic disease and the processed foods, how they came in as a bit to solve a problem. And to many persons, it is a solution to a problem for them. If we must fix this, we somehow have to find a way in the middle because convenience will always be a thing.
You're right. In other countries where health and the availability of food, of course, they really take it to a different level. There are supermarkets where there's an aisle that's designated to healthy
Yep.
foods, healthy snacks. You're right that there are prepackaged meals that are healthy and they're telling you what's in there. And so I think what though I like the way that you phrase it, the collateral
Yep.
damage in the processing is the loss of
Yep.
nutrients, and that's where, from your earlier comment in terms of nutrients and you being deficient of it, creates this issue of when you're having these chronic
Yeah.
non-communicable diseases coming on.